We are just gonna hop right into side bending today. No big introductions, so here we go. A few pieces of the side bending jigs that I have. So I've got one big mold with a cutaway here, and then I've got another mold, no cutaway. So this will be the tops of both guitars. It'll be the bottom side of one guitar on the non-cutaway, and then this will be the bottom of the cutaway guitar. These are the two boards that we're going to bend for the sides for the non-cutaway guitar. And this is the flat edge, and this is the flat edge up here. So I've marked it, the back, the top, this goes up, the top, the back, and this side goes up. You can see I've got my form marked for 19 inches here, and that's from the back where it gets cut to here. A little bit of extra here gives me just a little bit of insurance, something to cut off. I used my square to draw a line from the squared up ends to make sure that that line is consistent all the way around. And as we wrap these up and put them in foil, that line needs to transfer around the foil. And then I also need to keep track of which way's the back, which way's the top, which way's up, so that we don't bend this thing upside down. These are two book matched pieces, and we've got to keep them in that order, and they bend exactly opposite of one another. This is the side we're gonna bend, so I've just got it isolated. The straight edge is facing toward me. I've got some water in a sprayer here. Not trying to soak this piece, just trying to get it wet. Now, again, this is my straight edge. I want to make sure that we're coming up just shy of the top so I can transfer my line. And then I want to make sure that I'm getting this foil all the way up to that squared edge so I can transfer my marks. Right there is my mark. Square it up, come across, and then I'm gonna write up here. Then we're just gonna roll it. So we're just gonna transfer that mark. I did take some of that foil off. I just don't really need that much of it. I think most people who are familiar with making guitars in this way or bending sides in this way are familiar with the sandwich. And again, I've got my flat edge toward me, and I'm gonna line up my spring steel, the front edge of my spring steel, and just try and get everything nice and square. I want it to go into the mold square and true as much as I can. I've got some clips here. And then my mark, just so I can see it really well from the outside, is going to be right there. I've got the sandwich heading in here. I've got my heating blanket that can just plug right in to our machine. Let's go ahead and turn it on. And I'm going to put my thermocouple. Some people put it in different places, and that's okay. I don't want to put it between my spring steel and my wood. I'd rather put it between the blanket and my spring steel. I think that gives me a little bit, I don't know, makes me feel better. How about that? I've got an extra piece of spring steel. And what I see in a lot of these bends is this piece does a pretty good job of bending this right here. But as you get a little bit more out into the flanks, it loses a little bit. And this plate, I'm hoping, will put pressure right where I need it. So pressure here and pressure here. And without the heat even being on, we can just give it a little bit of a bend. We'll square it up to the form. Now you can see why I wanted everything lined up on the square side. On the next piece I bend, I'll square it all off on the back side of this form. So this piece is cut down to 70 thousandths of an inch, which is a little thinner than some people use for their sides. I attempted to bend several Ovancall sides just as tests, and at 80 thousandths they were splitting out, and I was being pretty careful. I think I did 3 test sets that broke, and I knew I was going to do that. I kind of wanted to creep up on the number, and 75 thousandths I think is what these are at, seemed to be a pretty good number for me. Right now we can see it's set to 260 degrees and it's coming up to temperature. This is a timed event, but it's not overly crazy. I can already hear it making noise, so we know it's creating some heat. We're at about 107 degrees. And we're just going to bend this really. We're not forcing anything, not putting any undue pressure on anything. We're just kind of bending it. It's looking good. No concerns. We're lining right up on that center line. That looks really good to me. I'm digging that. So I'm just putting a little extra pressure on it right there. Make sure we get it really good in that groove. And you can see how well it's stuck there. Then I have my side clamps here. I've got one that's fixed, which is this one over here. So it goes on the back side. There we go. And then this one is not fixed. So it spins around and goes into this front side, and then I can tighten it down when I get it adjusted. That's good. And then these 2 screws put a little pressure on, and we're going to start sliding this. If I need a little extra pressure, here we go. Those springs give you a pretty good buffer zone is what I would call it. Just wanting to make sure it's held down tight, that we're getting good curvature. I can probably refine the design for this piece, this clamp piece. We're going to take off our little end clamps. Kind of want something with bearings or something like that. I think that'd be pretty sweet. Seen some other nice designs, but there we go. That's bent. I didn't hear any cracking, so that was good. This one's set up the same way. We'll poke the back one in, rotate this around in the front here, tighten it up so it doesn't give me any surprises. Then tighten these guys down just so we have a little tension. Oh yeah. Beautiful. What temperature? We're 260 right now. I'm just going to kind of go slow on this front. I want it to bend into a nice curve here. Nice and tight as I can get it anyway. I'm going to pull this over so we're heading off the table. There we go. Just needed to get past that one spot. And again, there we go. A little bit more. Perfect. Great. And we'll make sure we're tight here. A quick look at those edges. Nice and tight to the form. Just like we want it. Now, of course, there'll be some spring back, but it's going to have this memory in it. And you can see the heater turning on and off. That little controller is pretty sweet. You can just get one on Amazon. I built this whole thing myself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let it sit here and cook for about 5 minutes. It's been a few minutes, so I'm just turning off the heating blanket here, and I'll be able to watch this temperature drop over the next half hour or so and just keep an eye on it. When it gets down around 80 degrees, I'll turn it back on for 10 minutes. Let it sit overnight, and then we'll take this out tomorrow and see what we got. We've cooled back down to room temperature here. Everything's nice and cool to the touch. 89.3. We're just a little bit warmer than room temperature, but I'm going to click the power back on and let it come up to 260 degrees again, and we'll just leave that on for about 10 minutes. Here we are, it's about 240 degrees. You can see a little bit of steam coming out here on the sides, and we're going to start the 10-minute clock. Doesn't have to be right on 260. I just want it to be warm for about 10 minutes. So I'm going to kill the power to the heating blanket and then our main power here. It is the next day, and we're just going to work these clamps off real quick. This is the proverbial Christmas present unwrapping, and if you're careful you can reuse the foil. If you're not as careful, you'll just have to get a new piece out, no big deal. And there's our guitar side. Looks pretty good, didn't get too roasty toasty anywhere, no burn marks. You can see a little bit of the figure coming out in the wood. So we're going to do its Siamese twin. Again, this is my straight edge, and on the twin, the straight edge will be on the back side. So we'll line it up with the back of the form. Back here, we'll also keep the back side of the spring steel straight. Getting her fired up here. Turn on the heat blanket. And I'm looking to make sure that I'm fairly centered. I'm pretty close. I'm not gonna move that too much more until it gets warmed up here. Already starting to get warm. These things go fast. We'll go ahead while that's getting warm. Get our clamps on here. I can hear it heating up. Looking at my center mark, that all looks good. Pulling these down nice. We are almost up to temperature there, probably already have been up to temperature. There we go, and I'll tighten this clamp down just to make sure we don't go anywhere. Tighten that up. Stoked with that one. We're gonna let it go here for just a minute. Make sure it's nice and warm. Then we'll turn it off. Do the same thing. Let it cool all the way down. Turn it back on for 10 minutes. Let it cool all the way down. I've got my form set up here with the Cutaway swapped in. And not too many people, I haven't seen too many YouTube videos on getting these cutaways with this style of bender. A lot of the Florentine ones are out there where you come to a point out here at this horn, and that's just like a two-piece deal, but bending a single-piece cutaway. I've done one other one on this form, so hopefully we'll be successful again and get number 2 here. I'm using a strap, a ratchet strap, to make this happen, so you'll see how I do that, a little unorthodox, but I think it's gonna work out. One thing to remember is this is actually, on a right-handed guitar, the bottom of the guitar. So the guitar top would be on the back side. The guitar back is facing us. So we're going to want the straight edge of our board that we're bending against the back edge here lined up. Once again, I've got lines here for where I want the waist. I've got it labeled top and back, and then up, meaning this side up. We're just going to spray it down real quick. Again, you don't have to drown it, but I'm going to make sure we've got plenty of moisture in the area that the Cutaway is in, because I don't want it to accidentally be dry. So I think we're good there. And we will fold up our tin foil here. Our lines are good. Fold it up. And then again, for those who've never seen this before, it's the sandwich. And essentially I got a piece of spring steel on the back. I put my board in, I've got my heating blanket, and then another piece of spring steel for the top. And I try to get these all lined up as best I can on this back edge that was square. Because again, the side that goes toward the guitar top is a straight line, at least how I've cut my pieces. It just makes it easier for me to remember. I'm putting some just spring clips on here to hold everything in place. And I'm gonna set this in my bending form. Again, lining up my waist with my form here. The heat is not on, the power's not on. I'm just gonna give this a little bit of pressure to hold it in place. And then check against the back edge here, just make sure we're square as we can be anyway. We'll hit the power button. We'll make sure our temperature sensor's in here. And again, I like to put it between the blanket and the steel. That way I get a reading right off the blanket. You can do it between the wood and the blanket. I just like it there. Just saying. Before I even turn the heat on, I'm going to get as much of this set up as I possibly can, because there is way more to do on a Cutaway than there is on a normal standard side. And again, I learned all of this in the one Cutaway piece I've made. It was just apparent to me that it takes way more focus. So the more I can get set up here ahead of time, I think the better off I'll be. Firing up the heating blanket here. And again, sort of a timed event. We're at 116, 118 degrees. Time to start putting a little bit of pressure here. And I'm looking at my waistline there. I think I'm in good shape. Nice and easy. 140. You can hear the sizzle. Just starts to sound like something frying a little bit. I think we're in good shape here. There we go, settling right in, making that nice and tight. This just needs to bend a little bit here at the front. And what I'm looking for is to bring this front horn almost vertical. That's looking good. We're going to take off our clamps, and I've just got a ratchet strap attached to this thing, and hopefully we can keep it all together. We're getting pretty close to where we need to be. I'm digging that. Now we'll tighten this down a little bit more. I think that's about as good as I'm gonna get it. I feel like that's pretty nice. I don't know if you all caught that while I was bending this, but I pulled the power out of the wall, and so I'm just firing it back up. Thankfully, everything was warm enough that it bent just fine. Obviously, as I'm doing all this stuff, I'm listening for the crackling sounds, and you're feeling for what's normal. And it did just fine bending, but I fired it back up here. I'm just going to leave it on for a few minutes, and just make sure it's all baked in. I guess it's kind of how I'm looking at it. Okay, next morning, let's get this sucker out of the mold and see what we wound up with. Fingers crossed, right? Yahtzee. There we go. Let's get our spring steel, first one out of there with the heating blanket. There's our side. Go to our second spring steel. Let's see what we got. This is definitely exciting for me. I think I've gotten 4 sides with this one piece of foil. Feels like a record. Already looking good, no big scorch marks that I can see. Oh man, yeah, no cracks. That's probably the most important thing. That thing looks awesome. Now it's time to make this bad boy into a guitar, huh? I think that's gonna do it for today. This is exciting. There's nothing more harrowing than trying to bend to a form that you've never bent to before and just hoping that it's gonna come out. But I think, you know, research and experimentation is what leads to success, and that's exactly what we did here. Experimented with some different wood, you know, trying to narrow in on the thickness that's right, and then the whole sequence of temperature and how much water and just all those things that affect the bend and the timing. You know, that's a learned skill to understand the timing to bend these things and when it's ready to go. Didn't take me too many iterations to get that. So it's not like this hill you can't climb, but it is something that you have to realize that you got to get over and you got to get through. If you're buying one set of wood and it's your $2,000 Brazilian rosewood sides and you expect to do it on the first shot, good luck. The next time we get together, we'll start turning these sides into a box. We'll put in the neck block and the heel block, and then I don't know if we'll be able to have enough time to do it, but put the radius on the top and the back of these. It's gonna start looking like a guitar very soon. And that makes me super excited. So for everybody who's followed along this far into the build, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks for all the nice comments that everybody's making. We'll see you next time.
If you would like more guitar-related content, click that subscribe button. If you want to follow the rest of this build, click the playlist to the right. And as always, visit skyscraperguitars.com for guitar tools and accessories.